In this second part of the .NET 5 REST API tutorial, we introduce the foundations of our API, which includes the core entity used to represent the items in our catalog, the repository class responsible for all item storage related operations, and the controller that will handle all the requests sent to our REST API. Here you will learn how to model an entity via C# record types, how to implement an in-memory repository of resources, and how to implement a controller with getRoute to retrieve resources. Alright, so now that we are comfortable with the initial setup of our project, it is time to start setting up the entities and the repository that's going to be used to store and retrieve the items that are going to be used across the service. So the first thing we're going to do is, well, let's actually just close this and the terminal, and let's get rid of a few of these classes that really make no sense for our project. So I'll just delete weather forecast here, and I'll delete the weather forecast controller. So we can start cleaner than that. So let's introduce our entity, the item entity. So for that, let's add a folder here called entities. Some people will say domain, and some other people may say models. In our case, entities should be good enough. Let's create a file here. Let's call it item.cs. Let's follow the right namespace here. So the namespace should be catalog, and since we're in the entities folder, let's say entities. And then what you would usually do at this point is declare a class, right? So you could say public class, and let's say item. However, since .NET 5 and C# 9, there's a new option here for you, which is what we call the record types. So record types are pretty much classes, but they have better support for immutable data models, right? Which means that once you get one instance of this object, it is not possible to really modify it, and that's pretty convenient, especially for objects that you receive over the wire. So objects that are coming from the web. Usually, you just want to take them and do something with them, but you don't want to modify them, right? Also, record types have this thing called the with expressions, which we're going to see later on in this tutorial, and they are also provide ability to compare based on value. So value-based equality is what they call, which this means that when you compare two instances of this of an item, in this case, those instances will be equal only if all of the properties of that instance are the same, as opposed to just the identity of the object itself, which will be the case of classes. So record types are pretty handy. I think are a great option for the objects that we're going to be using over here. So let's switch class for record right there. And it is time to introduce the properties for this record. So let's add just a few properties here. So let's see. So let's use GUID for our ID. And let me import that using system. Yeah, system namespace was missing there. And then before adding more properties, let me actually make a small change here. So instead of using getSet, let's switch to init. So what is init? This is another addition in the in C# 9 in .NET 5, which it's a great fit for property initializers that where we want to only allow setting a value during initialization, right? So this means that, for instance, in the past you could say getSet. What this means is that after you create the object, you can just modify, in this case, the ID anytime. So that's not really desirable. We want an immutable property. So for immutable, we will have set private set, right? And so yeah, so this makes it immutable, but now it is very challenging to construct any instance of this object. So now we have to introduce a constructor, and then our customers don't have a really nicer way to construct our objects. So to get into a good middle ground there, they introduced the Init Accessor here. So this means that you can use a creation expression to construct this item object, as you would do with a set. But after the creation, you can no longer modify this property. So it's a very nice balance between the two worlds in there. And we'll see how this plays out later on. So at this point, let's just define our properties. So let's see, let's add, of course, a name. A name, it's going to be string name. Also in it, let's add a price for our item. Price, also in it. Oops. And finally, let's add daytime offset. This is created date. So this is going to be the date and time where the item got created in the system. Let's also not forget to change this to init. And now it is time to introduce our repository, which is the class that is going to be in charge of storing the items in the system. To keep things simple for now, we will only use an in-memory repository, and a few episodes later in the tutorial, we will bring in a proper database. So let's create a new folder here called repositories. And here we will add a new file. Let's call it in-mem items repository. Let's put the right namespace here. Let's not forget that. It's going to be catalog.repositories. Right? And now let's create a class. So holy class, I'll just grab the name from the name of the file. Right? And what we're going to do here, like I said, this is in memory. So we're just going to define a very simple list of items that are going to be the initial items that we're going to be working with. So let's declare a list here. So let's see, write rate. I'll make it read only because it should not change. I mean, the instance of the list should not change after we construct this repository object. It's going to be a list of item. List of item. And I think, yeah, so list of item, items. And yes, we need to import the couple of namespaces there, collection generic for the list and catalog entities for the item. And we're going to say this is new. And here we're going to declare the list. Now this is another addition in C#9. As you see here, in the past you may have needed to say, okay, so this is new list of item, right? But that's a bit redundant since we already know clearly this is a list of item. So why so much ceremony? So let's just remove this, and that's all you need to do at this point. So nice addition, C#9. And so let's add a few items here. So let's say new item, and let's do the initialization here. So let's just do random GUIDs. New GUID for the ID, and again let's import the missing namespace. And so for the name, and so like I mentioned in the introduction, I like to play with these items in terms of video game items. So the first item that I'm going to introduce here is a potion, super classic in these video games. And then let's say the price for that one is going to be just 9. And for created date, well, I'll just say daytime offset UTC now. So that means right now in terms of UTC. So not the local time, just the UTC time. And just as we did this one, let's add, oops, a couple more. So same GUID, I mean, yeah, a new GUID for each of these ones. But let's call this one, it's going to be a items word. And let's say it's going to be more expensive. Let's make it 20. And then for the last one, let's say we're going to do bronze shield. Going to be a bit cheaper. So let's say 18. All right. So there it is. We have our initial list of items ready to go. Now in this repository, we're going to have to deal with a bunch of things, right? So how do we get an item? How do we get a collection of items? How do we create an item, update, delete, all these things? So to keep things simple, let's start with a get. So we're going to do 2 get methods here. And the first one is going to be get items. And for getting items, we're just going to return an enumerable of item, get items. Right, so enumerable is pretty much the very basic. Enumerable is a basic interface that you can use to return a collection of items. And then, yeah, so it's going to be as simple as say, well, let's just return whatever we have in items right now. That's all it is. So that's our get items method. And the next one is going to be similar, but this guy is going to return just one item. It's going to be named get item. But this is going to need to know the ID of the item to return, right? Okay. Stat. And then, so in order to retrieve the correct item, what we're going to do is just say, okay, so let's return from the items collection. And I'm going to say where, and this requires importing yet another namespace, system.link, importing now. And so we're going to say, okay, so from that list, where the item ID equals the ID that we got in the parameter. And that's going to return a collection, but we don't want the collection, we just want the one item that it should find. Or default, where default is going to be null. So if it finds the item, it will return it. If it doesn't find it, it will return null. All right, so that makes up our repository. And so the next thing to bring in is a controller. So like I said, the controller is going to be the class that receives the request that has been sent by our client and that handles it properly. So let's add our controller class then. So new file under the controllers folder, and since the resource we are dealing with here is items, so the convention will be to just name it items controller.cs, right? And again, declare the right namespace, catalog. In this case, it's going to be controllers. All right. So this controller is going to be public class items controller. And then the interesting thing about controller classes is that you always want to inherit from controller base. That gives you, and there's also import the namespace here. So that will effectively turn this into a controller class, right? So let's always inherit from controller base. That's the first thing. The next thing is to mark this class as an API controller. Right there. Yeah, API controller. So this brings in a bunch of additional default behaviors for your controller class that just makes our lives easier. So yeah, don't forget to add API controller there. And yeah, and by the way, there's tons of documentation on each of these attributes over there in the web. Next thing is to declare the route. So the route defines to which HTTP route this controller is going to be responding. And by default, what you would put here is just the name of the controller. So if you do this, this will mean that whatever the name of the controller is, that's going to be the route, right? And so in this case, for instance, let's say for a get, you would do get/items, right? That's going to be part of the URL that we will be using. So yeah, I mean, you can do it either that way, or you can explicitly declare the route that you want to use. Like I could say do items, which is perfectly valid. And in fact, let's stick with that. And let's move forward. Now here in this controller, of course, for any action or any operation we're going to do, we're going to be needing that repository that we worked on a moment ago. So let's bring in an instance of that. We're going to declare private read-only, again, because it's not going to be modified after construction. Items repository, right? And yep, for namespace, we have it ready. Now, before moving forward, let me just tell you that we'll be making a few not so ideal choices as we move forward, just to explain a bunch of concepts, right? So the fact that I'm introducing explicit dependency into in-mem items repository, it's not ideal, but I just want you to keep things simple and then improve as we move forward, right? So just don't take this as a final word on how you should do this. Now, we're going to construct this in the constructor of this controller. So let's add a items controller as the constructor. Okay, and then let's say, yeah, so repository equals new in-mem items repository, right? So boom, we have a repository right there, ready to be used. So let's define our routes. It's time to define our routes. So let's see. How do we define a route to retrieve all the items? So let's do it. Let's declare a method called IEnumerable of item. Item get items. Okay, so this is a method that's going to return an IEnumerable of item, just like the repository. Let's import the right namespaces that we're missing here. Okay, but then also, in order for this method to actually become a route and react to some HTTP verb, you have to declare the right attribute. In this case, HTTP get is what we want to declare for this. So by doing this, it means that when somebody goes to and performs a get against /items, this is a method that's going to be reacting to that. Right, and you'll see how in a few cases we pretty much have the same route, but it is the verb that makes a distinction into which method is going to be invoked. Then what do we do in this HTTP get? So fairly straightforward. What we're going to say is, okay, so we have items is going to be repository. You remember we created this get items method, so we just invoke it. We have the items, and then we return the items, and that's all it is. Okay, so with that, we should be able to test this out and see how that goes. So I'm going to hit F5 here. All right, I'm going to go back to Swagger, and I'm going to just refresh the page that we kept open from the previous video. As you can see, everything got refreshed now. There's no more weather controller. Now we have a items controller, and we have our first route here, which is a get for items. We know not only that, we also have a schema that describes an item, how an item will be laid out. If we click on items, and let's see, try it out, let's see what we get. And right here, as you can see, Swagger will show the route that would execute it. Like we said, it's a get on /items. This is here is our host and the port. So it gets localhost 5001 items, and here's the result. So we have our 3 items that we declare as a static, as the initial value for our items collection, right? The potion, the sword, and the shield, right there. This is working great. So now let's stop this and add our second route, which is the route to return one specific item. So this is going to be public item, get item, and then we need to receive a GUID, right? And then are we missing a namespace again? Let's see. Yes, we're missing a namespace. That's what it is. And then just like before, we just say, well, var item equals repository dot get item. Okay, so this is the other method that we added to the repository. We just pass the ID and we return that item. Now again, we need to mark to apply the right verb here. So it's going to be an HTTP get. But in this case, there's a little additional detail, which is the template. So we have to provide a template where we specify how we're going to treat another piece of the route. Like in this case, the route is not going to be just get/items. It's going to be get/items and the ID of the item, right? Which is that piece of the template. I'm just going to put it like that. So when you request the items slash and a specific item ID, then this piece is going to get executed, right? So yeah, let's see how that goes. I'll do F5 again. Okay, this is running. Back to Swagger. I'm going to just refresh the page. And as you can see, now we have our second route available. And like I said, this is /items/ID. So in order to execute that, let's actually execute the first one, items, to get a list of all of our items that we know about. And let's grab the first one. So in theory, we should be able to get that item via the other route. So get by ID. So let's try it out. I'll paste the item here. So this is how in OpenAPI Swagger you can introduce values, right? And I'll execute that. See what happens. So here's the executed route. So you can see /items and the actual ID. And then interestingly, we are getting 204, right? So this means that something didn't go quite as expected. So what I'll do is I'll go back to Visual Studio Code and I'll put a breakpoint over here, see what we're getting. So I'll go back to Swagger UI and execute. Here we got a breakpoint and all right, so we're getting null. So that's what's happening. So the item is not being found. So why would that be? Well, let's see. Here's our items. And here's our get item method. And so, yeah, so really what was happening here is that anytime we make a request to our controller, to our service, we are actually creating, as you can see over here, a new instance of the in-mem items repository, right? So that new instance is created. A brand new list is created, which a random set of new GUIDs here. And of course, when we try to use a previously used GUID, it will not find it because now we have a brand new list. So I'm going to do F5 just to let it go. And this is actually a good thing because it helps us realize that we need to deal with that situation properly in the controller. So in this get item method, we should be not just returning a null, right? So how do we handle this? So let's stop it. So the thing that we probably want to do is to return the proper status code, HTTP status code, in the case that we can find the item. So let's say, so if item is null, right? So let's return actually something different. So let's return not found. So that's the way to actually ask .NET to create the proper status code for not found. So we don't have to actually figure out, so what's the actual status code. And then, yeah, if it is found, then we will just go ahead and return the item. Now we do have a problem here because now in one branch, we're trying to return this type, not found result. In this other branch, we're trying to return just an item. So what is it going, I mean, it's not liking it, right? We're expecting to always return an item. How do we deal with this? Is by the use of the action result type. So if we do action result, that actually allows us to return more than one type from this method. So as you see, there's no more errors because now this is saying, okay, if you want to return not found, return not found, or if you want to return the type that is in the generic type right here, you're also able to do that, right? Or we can also say something like okay item if you wanted to. That would be fine too. But now in this case, we can handle both cases. So let's run this again and see what we get. The idea is to get the proper status code for each of these actions to be properly RESTful. So let's refresh this. Let's get one of these items. I'm going to try it out. Execute. So again, you just get one of these. We know it's not going to find it, but let's get that good. And then open up here, try it out, put the ID, and execute. So this time we do get a 404, which is a correct status code for not found, as you can see here. So that is suspect. So yeah, so that's great. And that's going to be the end of this video. So we do have a problem here, right? I mean, yes, we can detect not found, but we are not able to return the item in either case. So how can we resolve this? So that's what we're going to check out in the next video. We're going to be talking about dependency injection, singletons, and how that's going to help us overall. So yeah, that's the end of this video, and hopefully you found it useful. And if you did, please consider hitting a like and subscribing to the channel so that you know as soon as I publish new videos. And yeah, so that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.